Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host. She's an award-winning broadcaster, a commentator, presenter, and a best-selling author. My Animals and Other Family went straight to number 1. Her new book is Walking Home, My Family and Other Rambles. Clare Balding.
These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots
are gonna walk all over. Hello, good afternoon. I feel slightly guilty that I haven't come out in walking boots because clearly I couldn't walk further than about 5 steps in these, but it works for theatre. Thank you so much for coming out on a wet and rather wild Saturday afternoon. We've got a fabulous lineup for you tonight, and what's happening here last night and today is that Blinkbox Books have come up with a fantastic idea and a great format. And it allows you who love reading and who like to hear people speak in person rather than just through a box or through your phone or through your computer. It gives you the live experience. And here we are in that old-fashioned way, actually looking at each other in the eye and having proper conversations. It's amazing, and it works, which is lovely. Last night, we had Graham Norton and David Nichols, the author of One Day and Us, which is his latest book. And Graham's memoir comes out in 3 weeks' time. And you'll have noticed in the lobby as you came in, there are boxes for questions from you. My favourite question last night, slightly weird I thought, was what do you wear when you write? And we all looked at each other, and clothes? And then a voice from the audience went, do you not do it naked? No! No. But it's your opportunity to ask them both, because we've got a wonderful lineup this afternoon. Danny Baker and Paul Merton, and I know they are the reason that most of you are here, but you get me as well, hey. So questions for any of us, all of us, whatever you like, during the interval, and some of you will have done them already. But the purpose is to engage with people about books and to find out how they write, why they write, what they write. And all of us obviously have books out right now. My own, as you could tell from the music, is to do with walking. And some of you may have read My Animals and Other Family, which was my first attempt at a memoir about a feral childhood, really, growing up thinking I was a dog. Which I was very happy with. I don't think there's anything wrong with sleeping in the dog bed and drinking water from a bowl on the floor. I really don't. And bonios are quite tasty if you give them time. And about my love of ponies and the love of my life, who is called Frank, who is a particularly ugly pony. This book is sort of more up to date and brings us right up to this year, actually, because I talk about Sochi and the Winter Olympics and why I went and why I thought it was important to go to a country that would not particularly accept me in normal life. And I also talk about London 2012 and the phenomenon, the thing that happened, and I don't understand how or why. I wasn't the lead presenter of London 2012. I wasn't even number 2 or 3, really. But there I was doing swimming, which some people didn't expect me to do, because obviously I know a lot about horses. I am effectively a horse. It's a world in which you can say great arse, and that is a good compliment. She looks very strong and well, and that's a good thing. Look at that sprinter's bottom, yes. So yes, I'm a horse. And there I was at the swimming with the lovely, lovely Mark Foster. We all get it, basically, don't we? I get it, you get it, straight men get it, everybody gets it, the lovely, gorgeous Mark Foster, there he is, just so you could feast your eyes. And we had this extraordinary event. So Michael Phelps is there trying to become, as the Americans say, the winning most Olympian ever, but certainly to win the most gold medals ever. And he gets beaten in a race that he hasn't been beaten in 10 years. And he gets beaten by a 20-year-old South African who looks like Kermit the Frog. And as Chad Leclos touches first, this guy up on the balcony is going absolutely berserk, waving a South African flag. And he comes down to sort of nearer us, to kind of where you guys are sitting, for the medal ceremony, which is right down in front of us. And I say to Mark, oh, go and get him. That must be Chad's dad. Go and get him. And luckily for us, he's in conversation with an ex-swimmer called Charlene, who married Prince Albert of Monaco. And Mark went to their wedding. I've seen the photos. They're very good. Amazing fireworks. Real fireworks, I mean. Anyway, Mark goes off to get him, and I say on telly, there's Mark, he's going to bring Chad's dad to us. No idea at that stage, no idea whether he can speak at all, whether he speaks English, whether he might swear a lot, no idea. And this guy comes to us, and I've made best friends with security, always a very important thing to do, and it was G4S, which really helped. So they let him through. He was a very nice guy on the gate. I so hope he didn't get sacked. Anyway, he let him through. And Bert comes out, And I promise you one thing I have learnt, and really through doing ramblings for 15 years, which is some of this book is about my love of ramblings, my love of walking, but the other thing is what you learn in broadcasting. And I'd lost my voice once for ramblings, and my producer, Lucy, had basically said, we have to get on with it with the BBC. We've paid for the tickets to fly to Edinburgh, so you have to do it. And I'd really struggled, and I couldn't talk. So learnt the art of just holding the microphone, letting other people do the work. So when Bert came on and suddenly was brilliant, look at my boy, unbelievable, this is unbelievable, my beautiful boy, look at him, don't look at me, I am fat. And then suddenly in the middle of it all, are we live? Yes, we're live. But I knew just hold the microphone and let him talk because he's brilliant. And he embodied everything that we would all feel if our child had just done that. So the pride, the love of it all. And for most people, it's the event they remember from the Olympics that isn't a gold medal winning performance. So of course you remember Mo and the Mobot and all of that, which by the way I invented. Anyway, that's in here. The Mobot, I know, weird, isn't it? My brother says that'll be my one true legacy, the world going round in the bloody Mobot. But anyway, that story's in there as well. So there's a chapter called Unbelievable, which is all about the Olympics. But essentially, it's about, if the first book was about galloping through life and jumping every fence in the way and hurtling on, this is about, probably for all of us, getting a bit older and slowing down. And learning to enjoy I don't want to say the journey because everyone says the journey. Learning to enjoy the process of getting from A to B and not just wanting to be at B as soon as you leave A. So it's about that. And it's also about discovering that our country, is not just made up of racecourses, which I spent my childhood thinking it was. And Newmarket and Lambourne, lovely as they are not the centre of the earth. And that there is a whole county west of Newton Abbot Racecourse called Cornwall, which I'd never been to as a child. And now suddenly I'm walking the Southwest Coastal Path, or I'm discovering the Pennine Way, the spine of our country, where there are no racecourses. But it's finding out, and the people that I meet along the way. And there's a lot in here as well about friendship and about long-term, enduring relationships, and how walking is good for you, because you walk side by side and you haven't got that awkward eye contact thing going on. If you've got a difficult conversation to have with a member of your family, or indeed your partner, or your dog, walk with them. And Archie and I have had many conversations where I've basically said, Archie, we do need to talk about this. He doesn't take any notice, but it's a very, very good way of unpacking things that are bothering you, but it's also incredibly good for mental health, and a lot of research has been done to prove it. So there is a fair bit in here about that as well. There's also a chapter about walking in Ireland with this fantastic botanist who's a broadcaster in Ireland, and she's called Éanna Ní Lamhna. And I tell you that because when you see it on the page, you will not think that's how it's pronounced, but that is how it's pronounced. And I walked with her first in the Wicklow Mountains, and then I met up with her again 10 years later, and she doesn't stop. I mean, easy job as an interviewer, but my God, the woman doesn't draw breath. And she's fantastic, and I love her energy. So just a very, very brief bit. 10 years later, in 2012, I met up with Éanna and her husband John to walk in Dublin Bay. By then, they'd been married for 35 years. John was much quieter than Éanna. But if I'm being honest, that's not difficult. And seemed silently to absorb the information that his wife delivered at breakneck pace, occasionally adding a detail or two of his own. Éanna can't walk on a beach without diving off to collect shells or look for lugworms. It was like taking a puppy for a walk. I thought she was beside me, then she wasn't, and I could see her frantically digging in the sand with her bare hands. It really was like a puppy, honestly. She burst into a song about cockles and mussels and told me how Molly Malone, of the song, died of typhoid. Then she told me about lugworms and their predators, curlews, who have nerve endings at the end of their beaks to help them find their breakfast in the sand. She did all this without seeming to take a breath. It was a staggering display of non-stop, information-laden, one-way conversation. John stood there, listening to it all as if he'd never heard it before, smiling. He'd retired earlier that year, so Éanna, in a flash of inspiration, had decided that they should climb all 26 of the highest peaks in Ireland and Northern Ireland. They did them all and got a certificate from the Mountaineering Association for their trouble, which was lovely, but not enough for Éanna, who decided they'd go further afield and climb Mount Snowdon, so they did that. And then she thought they should do Ben Nevis, so they did that too. Bear in mind that they have both long since celebrated their 60th birthdays, and the woman who had initially traipsed along to show interest was now suggesting mountain climbs for the two of them. As for John, I'm charged with what's called mountain foreplay, he explained. That consists of studying maps and books and the internet and coming up with a plan. Aina just turns up, and I tell her where to park the car, and we go. And he basically says she slows down a little bit when we walk, because frankly, when you're climbing Mount Snowdon, there isn't a lot of breath to chat as well. Their relationship, though, which started by John taking Aina walking, has now developed into something where she suggests that they climb all these massive, massive peaks. And she gave me a lesson in bugs and birds and geology and everything. She's so interesting. So it's littered with the best of the people that I've walked with, the most interesting, the ones that have a story. There's one chapter that's very, very sad, but it is actually very sad, and I really struggled to write it, let alone read it for the audiobook. But I really hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope, the main thing I hope is that when you finish it, you'll say to yourself, do you know what, I really fancy a walk. Because if the whole country did that, I think we'd be an awful lot happier. As I mentioned, there's also a fair bit of about my work in there. And one of the amazing coincidences of this afternoon is that my first real radio catastrophe was very early on. How on earth I kept my job, or indeed got a job, I don't know. I started off doing racing bulletins on the old Radio 5 before it became 5 Live. And presenting the breakfast show in those days was a man called Danny Baker. And I was living at home in Kingsclear, because I couldn't afford to live in London. I was being paid £50 a week to do early morning racing bulletins. I think the first one was at 6:30, and then 10 to 7, 10 to 8. I think that was it. And then off, in theory, one could go and do another job if you could stay awake. And I'd overslept, so it was sort of September, October time. I'd overslept at home, and my dad was getting up early to do the horses and, you know, first lot, and realized, looked out for his bedroom window, saw my car was still there, came bashing on my door saying, get up, you're late. So I'd jump into my little red Mini, which I'd won riding in races. So I'd absolutely hammer up the M3, drinking Diet Coke the whole way, get into Broadcasting House, run in, pick up my notes for what the meetings are that day, run into the studio, start reading something, and it's awful. I mean, I could not get a sentence out. I was stammering, stuttering all over the place, hesitant, terrible. Danny, who's presenting, looks at me and goes, what is wrong with you this morning? And I went, I'm so sorry. Too much Coke on the motorway. And then I went, and I looked at him and I went, I mean Coca-Cola. And I realized then in that moment that, thank God, when you make a mistake on radio or television, nobody dies. The world doesn't end. It's not a tragedy. It's just a mistake. And he taught me in that second that actually you have to care a lot, but the key is not caring. When things go wrong, just get on with it. Just pick yourself up, laugh at yourself, and carry on. And I was so much better after that incident. I relaxed a lot more. I didn't write full sentences and scripts. I just wrote bullet points instead so I could have a proper conversation. And the radio is an incredibly intimate medium, I think. You tend to listen to it on your own. You tend to either be in a car or in the kitchen or in the bathroom or with headphones on. You don't judge people on the radio the way you do on television. And doing both, I know how different the relationship is with the audience. And I love radio. It's where I began. And it's where I'll finish, probably on air. But I know Danny feels the same way, and indeed Paul Merton does as well. So he is very much part of my career, and I most recently saw him in a Chinese restaurant in Manchester called Mr. Wings, where I was doing an interview for BT Sport with Robin van Persie, and he was having lunch with Peter Kay, because that's the world he lives in, and weirdly the world I live in. And we both now work at BT Sport, and he does a great show there with his old mucker, Danny Kelly. He's a fantastic man. I think he did a great job presenting 606 on 5 Live. He made that show what it is, and it didn't really exist before him. It is something slightly different now, but it's good because he did it originally. But way back when, he presented or worked on the 6 o'clock show with Michael Aspel, so he was a part of our lives every evening for most of us, through most of our childhoods. He's done a lot, he really has, and he has won many awards for it. Most recently, the Sony Gold Award for Speech Radio Personality of the Year. He is the current Speech Radio Personality of the Year, and I fully back that. And he also won 4 consecutive Radio Academy Awards, so he's still hot after 30 years. His latest book is called Going Off Alarming, and that is what he's going to talk about, and it's hilarious, and there are some great stories that he will share with you now. So, ladies and gentlemen, a huge warm welcome, please, for Danny Baker.
Thank you. Lovely. So nice. Thank you.
Please sit down.
Thank you. Thank you.
Liking the waistcoat, Mr. Baker.
I've
like
got
the
the
waistcoat.
waistcoats again after all these years. They're very forgiving. And
Are they
since-
back in?
They're very. I'm actually a great big fat fella, but look at this. They are functional with a hint of luxury.
Yes.
And they make you look like, as my old man used to say, a pox doctor's clerk. So thank you for noticing, and thank you for what you just said.
Oh,
That's
well,
very nice.
you're very welcome. As you know, you saw me right at the beginning and you didn't kick me out, which is
You was-
amazing.
You
so-
was absolutely. You
Dreadful.
were grinding your teeth and hanging on.
I know.
We're just fooling around in a radio
I
studio.
know.
You know?
That's dreadful. Can I say, on the basis of this, and indeed your first memoir, I Love Your Dad?
Yeah.
Your dad's Spud, he's called.
It
his
is,
name.
and it's completely inadvertent. I tried to move on with the narrative, but it never really goes anywhere in any of the books. And it's only, I mean, I always knew my old man was a much bigger character than me. And even when I used to be doing loads of telly and loads of stuff, as you walk through the streets, cars would go, mm-mm, and you always go like that. They go, not you, hello, Spud. Oi, oi. Everyone knew my old man.
And he was a bit of a wheeler dealer, wasn't he?
He was, but no more than perhaps most people on the estate were. I mean, he was very good at it, but he wasn't actually wheeling and dealing. People say like Del Boy, but there was an incredible kind of, and probably still is, even though it's been demonised another way, big working class culture of doing what you need to do to get by. And my old man was, as long as you had plenty of everything, he was reckless with his money, always was all his life, which he passed on to me, thank God. And no, really, I mean, and he had no respect for that. All he'd look after everyone around you. That's all you got to do. And it was only in the writing of it and the reaction to the writing of my old man, who is very, very funny, by the way, extraordinarily funny. But a lot of times intentionally. And he would. It was only in the writing of it and the celebration of him that I'm glad I did him all right, because he wouldn't like the books at all. Do you ever want to tell people that? Or that ain't funny in that. What's funny in that? You know, that is entirely his attitude for it. If you want to go, it's no one else's business, is it? What you going to write a book for? He wouldn't. So he wouldn't do that. But I'm glad I did write by him. And yeah, it is. In telling that story, there's no way. Right the way through it. I mean, right the way through.
But he also was hugely helpful to you. I mean, you didn't drive early on, did you?
No, he used to run me about.
And
He
he'd
didn't
take
drive
you.
till he was 48. Don't give him all the credit. My old man was 48 with it. And I used to say, he had a car. He bought a car on. We don't know where he got it from. And he used to get cars and we never knew where he got it. Never mind about where I got it from. So I used to say, but it was a terrible, like, it was a shocker. He had a van for a while. Then he had he bought a Citroen. We only had cars for about 4 or 5 weeks at a stretch. and he had the Citroen, a white Citroen. Now, I know nothing about cars, but a feature of the Citroen, it used to be, the back goes up when you turn on the... I didn't, well, none of us knew that. And it was sitting outside. He said to me and my brother, go and sit on the back. Stop it going up. You shouldn't be doing it. He said, why aren't the front going up and all? So we all got round the front and tried to bring it up to the level of the back. Where'd you park your... Dad, I didn't know you drive. Don't you... I didn't know. We're doing a TV version of the
had
books.
heard this, yeah.
And the crew T-shirts, as they sometimes make in this game, are going to have, don't you worry about that written on them. Because my old man's catch, don't you worry about that. I'll pass my test. When? In the army. All right. Another time, he'd forgotten, he told me that. I said, how old was you when you passed your test then? He went, that was when we lived in Deptford. Hang on, I don't think my old man actually passed his test, but he had a car and run me everywhere, including... He was taking me to the airport when I went to interview Michael Jackson. And he broke that. See, it's hard to do this, but my old man swore a lot.
I know.
A lot.
Well,
lot.
I'll do a quick check, because actually there's quite a lot of swearing
No,
in the
I
book.
can't. I can't.
No. Are there any children in?
No, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people don't like it.
You can do it without
A lot of
swearing.
people don't like it. But so I can't tell that. In fact, let's move on from my old man, eh?
That's fine. I can't.
The old Rolodex of dad stories went through.
Exactly.
No,
No,
not one
can't
of
do
them.
it, can't do
There's
it.
No. He was a very unabashed dock worker from a family of 14, and did right by us all the life. Very unsentimental, in which a lot of us have. I'm very unsentimental.
Apart from Bat Your Dog.
Oh but dogs are a definite allowance. I don't know I'm sentimental about it. I mean, yes, he did. He did actually. He went when old Twizzle went.
died, yeah.
Well, you read about Twizzle's life. Twizzle was born to be his dog. He's the dog who died and came back to life. Literally died and came back to life. He hung himself. I know, and I hate to say it, but if you read it, that makes perfect sense. He really did. He hung himself, and he was put in a bag, and we were taking him out, and he came back to life. And the vet said. The vet said he's dead. Anyway, but again, that wouldn't surprise me, old man. I mean, looking up going, he's all right. Dad, do you find nothing It's another thing with me old man, sorry, Claire. When we moved into our house, the house in Deptford, bought a house in Deptford. No one in our family had a house, you know, but that's all right. Perfectly happy on the estate. It's not like you grew up thinking, oh, I'm in this urban surrounding. No, didn't want to live anywhere else. Had no interest in living anywhere else. Anyway, so we got an house, and it was an old house, and a man of 101 years old owned it and died. It was in Deptford. And his wife had died a few weeks beforehand, and it wasn't even on the market, but we always want to live in this road, blah, blah, blah. And one day, I went round to put a note through saying, whoever sells this house, could you... And another old man, 80-odd, answered the door and said, yes. And I said, I didn't know anyone was here. He said, I've just come to pick the mail up. My father had this house. I said, anyway, in we went, empty house. And the bloke said, well, I've never sold a house before because I didn't think I'd be 81 when Dad died and I lived down at Worthing. And so I said, well, I've never bought a house before. He said, well, I said, how much are they asking for it? He said, I think 29,000. This is 1982, Victorian house, marble fireplaces in Deptford. So he said, 29,000. I said, 28,000? And he went, okay. And we shook hands. The estate agents rang up and they said, you can't do this. We've got people at Goldsmiths College want to live in that room.
That's brilliant.
Anyway, but we started taking up the lino in the kitchen. By the way, I didn't have 28,000, I didn't have 1,000. You've got to realise, but that's my old man's attitude. Buy it and sort out how you're going to pay for it later on.
There's a brilliant story about getting the mortgage, actually.
And I did.
Yeah.
So we took up the lino in the scullery. Lino went up, and there were 2 newspapers underneath the lino that people used to do to give it a bit of, you know. And one was May the 26th, 1928, and the other one was June the 22nd, 1930 or something. They were disparate. But May the 26th was his birthday, and June the 22nd is my birthday. And so we took this stuff up, and I said, Dave, I said, look, there's 2 newspapers found out under here. One's your birthday, and one's my birthday. Don't mind about all that. We'll put it out in the skip. I said, are you... No, I said, that's you've got to say that's weird. You ain't got to say nothing. All I've got to say is I ain't seen you doing work for about 5 minutes. And that's my old man. He gave no more thought to the moment than it needed. But that was a weird thing I always thought. And he did not want to talk about it.
You start with a story in here that you left out of your first autobiography.
What?
He left out of his first autobiography that had been shot in the bottom.
When I put the first book out, and it was just going to be one book, but once,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been a writer a long time for various people, and I've not done anything with myself, but I always knew this. One day I'd set this down. I've been telling these stories a long time, and it's only when you do it that you realise they are extraordinary. And people say, how can you remember all that? But I do, and I've been telling them a long while. So the first book came out and did gangbusters, did really well. And but mates of mine would come around and say, I read your book. How come you never put in, like, when you got shot? Oh, yeah. And so... the son of... Well, I'll tell you, here's the thing. It's not shot with a... Oh, it's shot. No, I got shot.
Yeah.
But not like with a gun. No, well, no, actually, yeah. But it wasn't an air pistol, but it wasn't like what killed Kennedy. You know, it was somewhere between the two. There used to be a thing between the two that had these long silver bullets with a feather on the end, and they were powerful. And just to tell the story, so I'm coming down Jamaica Road one night, about 2:45 in the morning. We'd had a late one down at Dockhead, and there was a load of us in about 1976. So we're coming down the long road called Jamaica Road in Rotherhithe that leads to Rotherhithe Tunnel. There's not a lot of people around, and we're going along, and a car passed us going this way, and I heard. That's why the opening lines of the book are, they say you never hear the shot that's going to kill you, so at least I know I wasn't going to die, because I heard it like that, and oh, dear Lord, bang. And my mates are all walking on. I can see this thing is there. It's torn me jeans, and the blood is starting to go like this. I've gone, I've been shot. So your mates are like, come on, what? I said, no, I have. And they've all come back, gathered round, about 8 of them, going, oh, take it, Baker's been shot, right? So I'm going like this, and I pulled this thing. Now, what I've not noticed is this car. They said, who's done it? I said, that car going down towards the tunnel. Must be a load of West Ham supporters. No, really. They come over Tower Bridge, go around our side of London. That's, you know,
Yeah.
I think that's fair game, to be fair. So so we've seen it going. I'm going like this. Anyway, going, come on, hurry up. I said, no, I'm not going to go back to the guy's hospital. I said, look at that. Now, what I've not noticed is before you get to Rotherhithe Tunnel, there's a roundabout. We've not seen the car has hit that roundabout and is now coming up the other side of the road. From their perspective, I'm that. And you've got to admire a moving car. It's a big target, but a moving car And I've gone, right. Now, if you think my mates were unsympathetic on the first one, you try calling them back, you've been just shot up there, bang. And so, yes, I forgot that. And the book as a narrative, yes, it moves on into, all the telly years, but to me that is far less interesting than balancing this kind of supposedly normal life with a job that I never sought, but can do. I can do, telly was...
And the amazing, when we do move it onto the telly, I mean, some of the people that you have interviewed, and you have a great chapter called They Might Be Giants, which includes a story about being late for Kenneth Williams. And you're going to meet him in a theatre, and you're 2 hours late.
Claire, but the strange thing is you say that, but you remember in the previous book, I'd been involved with, even the first job I had, I scored 14 and went to work in a record shop, and I met there, like Mark Bolan, Elton John, all these people by chance. I mean, I genuinely, that's why I am not an introspective person for a second. And Paul comes out, and Paul, in a minute, he's got a different take. But my person, I've never, ever been introspective. I have no depth at all. I'm a complete shallows, and God bless, I really am. I'm extraordinarily shallow. But I have always had this thing of being somewhere, and then we got in because of the record shop. If you read the first one, it led on to being kind of involved in punk rock, and I'm not a musician, but I did. So then I meet Blondie and the Ramones, and then I start writing for the NME, and I'm with Michael Jackson, and on and on and on. So by the time I'm coming to work for the 6 o'clock show, even though, and now I'm dealing with people my mum and dad know, so they loved it. Kenneth Williams, this is the odd thing about the Byzantine threads of the book. This is how I knew Kenneth Williams is because of my dad again. When I was little, he used to take me to the record library. I don't know if they probably, of course they don't still have them, what am I talking about? But record libraries used to be adjoined to book libraries. So you'd go in there and you'd flick through record covers and you'd take 2 or 3 albums out, and they used to give you a little card with a diagram of an LP and marks where the scratches were, and if it came back and there were extra scratches, you used to get fined. But you could borrow LPs and take them home. Not take them because people didn't have tapes, but you could borrow LPs. One of the LPs my dad would used to take me, used to wash them under the tap. The tea towel.
That'll do.
And they looked shiny when they went back, but it's frying tonight when you put them on. I used to get this LP called On Pleasure Bent by Kenneth Williams. Always comedy albums, as I have in the Velo records and things like his soundtracks. But this record I loved, and it's quite an obscure album. Kenneth Williams made it in 1965. And I know every song on it. But I'm aware Kenneth Williams is Kenneth Williams. So I'm working for the 6 o'clock show. We used to use everybody in showbiz as, fodder for the interviews and all of this. So we're eating Kenneth Williams. I think, that's going to be great. But I know Kenneth Williams is notoriously spiky, let's say. So he was scheduled at the end of the day, the last interview, the genius whoever did because it's very like the One show, the 6 o'clock show, although far superior in product. And and so we're coming back from like Walthamstow to meet Kenneth Williams as arranged in the Albury Theatre at 4 o'clock. We're finished in Walthamstow about 20 to 4. There's no way you're going to get across. And you couldn't ring then or anything. There was no house phone. They'd only opened up the bar downstairs for Kenneth Williams to come in. Nobody's answering the phone. It's about 25 to 5 when we get into Shaftesbury Avenue. We're walking around. About 10 to 5 when we start unloading. Is Kenneth Williams going to still be there? Probably no. I think it was even later than that. We've gone in, down the steps, and they're sitting in the gloom with his white Mac on at the bar. Kenneth Williams. The frost is incredible. We walked in, and the director walked over and said, Mr. Williams, I'm sorry, it's a disgrace if you think I've got nothing better to do than sit around for you people with your puny cameras. I work in movies, my dear, movies. But he's serious, and the nostrils are flaring, and he's saying, hey, so go back to this LP I used to get out. There was a track on it called, I think it's called Sciatica. And it was about an old lady complaining, and the thing starts with when I got up this morning, it's a monologue from Kenneth Williams, got up this morning, put my foot on the floor, it's like plugging into the mains, my iris will tell you, went down and said, cold, my iris will tell you. So it was all about my iris will tell you, and the punch thing was, so when Kenneth Williams is in this full flood, furious, I've only stuck around so I can tell you this, I can tell you to piss off, or I'd have gone, and it gives me great pleasure to say, and I just went, my iris will tell you. And he went, how do you know that? So I went, oh, Mr. Williams, the 60s was bigger than Sgt. Pepper's. He went, you come away from these ponces and talk to me. And me and Kenneth Williams got on terrifically. If you ever look in his diaries, it says sometimes, did the 6 o'clock show tonight, with the Aspel creature. Him and Michael Aspel hated each other. When he died, I remember he died on a Friday, and we was in the Friday morning meeting leading on to the 6 o'clock show, and somebody come and said, everyone, sorry, Kenneth Williams has just died. And Michael, I'll never forget, Michael went, oh, really? Shame. What were you saying? True story. I don't think that's in there.
No,
I don't think
it's
that's in
not.
there. So Kenneth Williams, anyway, we got on fantastic. Look in the diary, it said he did 6 o'clock show, a lot of studio guests, and it says things like, did it with the Aspel creature, Tarrant, Street Porter, and Danny. I'm just, have a look, I'm just Danny in there. But, say, the previous book with all the Beatles in it and meeting them and all this stuff, this is more homegrown. You've got Tommy Cooper, Frankie Howard, etc., and even Zappa and Dylan in there. So.
And it's really, I mean, it's so illuminating because you never know what these people are really like if you haven't met them. And I don't want you to give away all the stories because obviously people are going to read the book. That's the point.
And yet amongst that company, as I say, my old man and my friends, I think, more than hold their own. So that's the extraordinary thing is, and I hope, having been doing this 35 years, that is what drives it. If it was just and then I met, because I read loads of showbiz autobiographies, and the author disappears under this welter of generic stories.
Yes.
And so the one thing I always intended to do and couldn't do any other, there was not have them generic and not have what they're really like, but what they really did. And as you know, no one's a monster in this game. People like to say, who's the worst you ever met and stuff. And you think, well, you don't really see each other. Paul Merton, nuisance. But otherwise, no, it's so...
Paul Merton was due to be on the second half of the show. No. You do tell a story there about Spike Milligan, and actually Spike appears in Paul's book as well.
Yes,
because
yeah.
I think Paul, and he'll tell us this, one of the biggest compliments he ever got that really meant something to him was Spike Milligan saying to him, "You're a funny man." You tell a story about him pulling the clock off the wall at ITV.
He did that. No, again, I mean, I would never take on board someone and think, oh, I can't say anything to Spike Milligan. We got on, again, tremendously. I was thrown together with him, and he's Spike Milligan, for God's sake. And I think of all the names out the book, having the biggest influence on my life will be Spike Milligan. And yeah, I've always had this. I don't know. I lack the gene to act. It's not deference so much, but the nervousness thing. I think it's quite obvious. I lack most other skills, but the one thing I can do is say to someone, "How's it going?" Did you do it the other night? Oh, right.
No, go on.
Right.
No, go on. What the other night? Go on.
Yeah, and so I'm not unaware of it, and I don't say this is the pure dumb luck that has governed my entire life. And if you read the books, it's just, really? That's an extraordinary coincidence. But it does all the time. So this is typical, and it continues till now. That's why when I got ill the other year, it didn't occur to me I was going to drop dead. I just thought, oh, come on, go, leave my body. And it did, and here we all are. Anyway, so I went to I'm writing as I say, the TV version of the books in a minute. And my mate, I'm doing it with Jeff Pope. If you saw Scylla, come on, well done, Jeff. So,
yes,
yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
But he also wrote Philomena with Steve Coogan. Yeah. So we're sitting around indoors. I've known Jeff, it was the first job he had in telly, was the 6 o'clock show. So again, how comes you know these people? Well, I've known Jeff, we holidayed together, but, he does all right. So he said, Michael Caine at the Albert Hall in a couple of nights. And I just tell this illustrative of, and I'm sure you'll be furious, people, say, oh, shut up. But it's the pure dumb luck that runs through these books. This is just Wednesday. He said, Michael Caine's at the Albert Hall tomorrow night. I said, do you want to go? I said, it's a bit late now, isn't it, Albert? I said, I'd like to. What's he doing? He's with the London Symphony Orchestra doing a... Anyway, oh, yeah. So he goes on one of these websites. And how did we drift into that, by the way, that you can't just buy tickets. You have to go to somewhere else that says, give me £120 for them tickets. Used to be called touting. I call it piracy. Anyway, so I got to 4 tickets, over 400 quid. He gets them because it's his birthday. So... Anyway, so he gets these tickets. So we go to the Albert Hall. Sorry about this, Claire.
No,
so we go to the
great.
Albert Hall.
I'm loving it.
Just this is indicative of how extraordinary and whatever, God's tennis balls we are. So we go to the Albert Hall, and they're all right, the seats. They're pretty good. And as we get to the Albert Hall, we see someone as we're approaching it who knows Jeff. He said, oh, Jeff, do you know Steve's here? Steve Coogan, who he wrote. He's here tonight. He's here with Rob Brydon, who I know. They're doing their Michael Caine before it starts. I thought, oh, great. Oh, terrific. And he said, what they're going to do is they're going to do their Michael Caine, then he's going to come on. And anyway, so in we go. We give our tickets in. We're just on the way, and somebody else stops us. Oh, Jeff, Danny, how are you? He said, what are you here for? Steve's in tonight. Would you like a box? So I thought, oh, there's 400 quid we're never going to see again. All right. All right. We got these tickets. Where are they? All right, yeah, box. So we led into this box. So into Albert Hall's, like. I've got another great story about being a boxer at Albert Hall. But anyway, so it's when I exposed myself. But anyway, so we...
This one will do.
So we go in the curtains, and there's Steve and Rob and a few other people in the little box. Lovely box at the Albert Hall. Hey, how you doing, boys? And they said, well, Danny, what's happening is what's they're going to... I said, I understand. They're going to do Michael Caine, and then Michael Caine's going to come on and say... They went, no, there's Michael Caine. Right, so... Oh, hello. Hello, how's it going? So I said, not bad. Now, there's only 2 seats left in the box, and my wife's going, don't make me sit next to Michael Caine. So I said, so now, barely, not even 48 hours from when we first decided to go, to the Michael Caine thing, I'm sitting next to Michael Caine. And my wife just says, it happens to you. Then so I'm sitting, there's 10 minutes to curtain up. How you going? So I said, not bad. And I told this story, which basically, and there's reasons for it. I dropped my trousers in a box because I didn't want to be seen by people in the corridor. I was changing for a television thing, and I'm keeping my eye on the door, and I dropped my trousers. And I thought, well, I'm so concerned keeping the eyes that way. There's the Albert Hall. And there was only about 200 people in, because it was... Anyway, so I said, so basically, Mark, last time I was here, I showed my ass at the Albert Hall, right? So he said, do you know what? That would have been a better title for your book. I said...
I showed my ass at Albert Hall.
He did. So when it eventually comes on television, there's Michael Caine sitting for the first 10 minutes, and I'm next to him. I don't know Michael Caine, but there I am. And that, as I say, I take great pleasure from it, and I hope it just doesn't sound like pulling it out there.
No, and I'm sure I saw a photo on Twitter or somewhere just the other day of Rob and Steve and Michael Caine backstage.
Look,
you probably took the photo.
No, you have a look in the box. I'm sitting. Yeah. I'll go to the Albert Hall to see Michael Caine. I was in Led Zeppelin for 25 minutes. I really was. I will talk about it. It's absolutely...
you would think, listening to Danny, that he never gets cross about anything, that he has great stories, that he has a wonderful... Everything is a laugh. But once in a while, you do lose it. And you lose it.
I love doing me now.
Loses it with management. And there is a brilliant story of you flipping out with Janet Street Porter, who was your boss, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. Well, you wait to the next book if you want to hear me flipping out with management.
That's it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, they're going to read that one nervously, thinking, no, wait to the third one. Anyway,
but you run back to Janet, because she wants
Janet.
you hate Vox Pops, she hates Vox Pops, he has to get more Vox Pops, and he's furious.
But she used to do that on purpose, and I hated doing Vox Pops, but it was a backbone show, and I know when we got enough, but Janet's like that. And in the days when mobile phones was like this, and they've rung up, yeah, Janet, we've got it, we're in the Strand. Yeah, we've got it, we want to come back now? No. Okay, another half an hour. I said, give me the phone. I said, oi, we've got it. We don't need to stay out here. What are you doing? You ate him, I ate him. She went, I don't know why she did this, but she got me into telly in the first place. She went, listen, Dumbo, if I say well, the phone was down and I was off, and I run down the Strand, I run over Waterloo Bridge, I run into ITV, everyone's waiting for the lifts. We was on the 10th floor. I thought, I can't wait. I started running up the stairs. 10 floors I ran up. I walked into our office. Everyone said, oh, Danny, you're back. I walked in, where is she? I said, in there. I opened the door to her office. She was having a meeting. I went, if you were... And I fainted. I fainted. I came round. I swear, Janet, who really admired that, we've got on great ever since, she took me to St Thomas's Hospital, where they said he's hyperventilated. They put me on a thing and a drip. They did put me on a drip, and she sat with me, and she said, you're all right now. So I said, oh, yeah. I said, she went, now then, you're going to have to go back tomorrow and do them. I said, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she just smiled. She went, that's so funny. She went, and she did say, nobody in telly does that. She went, that's her, I'll test her. But yeah, I fainted dead away. I do get a little worked up with management. Yes, I do.
Yes.
You know my old man's thing? Another thing, my old man told me ages ago, when I first started getting any kind of profile, and you get reviews, you know what reviews are like, but I couldn't complain, writing for the NME all them years. So he was in a pub one day reading, this is how long ago it was, Today newspaper. So he said, and you don't read him, he said, you seen this bloke here, what he said about you? I said, I know, Dad. I said, but that's how the game is, and you can't get hung up on it. In the docks would have tossed him straight in the drink. So I said, well, and you think, yeah, I said, well, I can't toss journalists in the drink, Daddy, you can't do it. And he folded it up, and I still think it's one of the best bits of advice I've ever read. He went, you know the trouble with your game? I said, what? He went, there's not enough right-handers dished out. oh, Dad, but secretly you're thinking, I know, Dad, I know. And I've never, my man was physical. I'm not. I've come into Deptford, oh no, we've got to get porn, but I've come into Deptford High Street one day, and again, it sounds too filmatic, but a fella came running out of this pub like this, and he fell over an Evening Standard sign. And I've gone, "You all right, mate?" And he's gone, bang, and he's gone off. Now, if you wrote this in a film, you say it's too hackneyed. So I've gone into the pub when my dad's sitting there. I said, "That bloke, what's that?" "Nothing." "Get a drink." I said, "Go on, what?" Anyway, two other blokes said, "Tell him, Fred, tell him." "Oh, nothing." So the bloke's come and he said, "Your man is a park keeper." A couple of days before, I'd gone in with my young son into Deptford Park and gone into the Parkies hut. There used to be Parkies huts. So I'd gone into the Parkies hut and said, "If I give you a tenner, would you put a net up at one of the goals?" I said, "We can't do it then. You know, honestly, if Lewisham Council see it, it's all about forms these days." This was them. So I said, "OK, well, not even worth a score?" I mean, "No, Dan, we'd love to, we can't do it." "OK, boys." Went out, said, "We can't do it," so we just played on. This park keeper we didn't know was in the pub. He starts saying, "That Danny Baker lives around here, doesn't he?" So he said, "Yeah, he come from Catford, the bloke. He'd just been working there for a couple of days." He went, "He come into our hut the other day." He said, "Listen, you lot, I want a net up there." And we said, "We can't." He said, "Do you know who I am?" Which is the greatest cliche in the book. And we said, "We can't do it." He said, "I'll have you all sacked," right? So my old man said, he went, "Oh, yeah?" So he said, "Yeah." He went, "Is that what he's like?" He went, "Oh, no, I bet he's a no good..." Well, that was the same fella I saw come steaming out their pub.
Good for your dad.
I know, he really, and you don't often get that kind of catharsis in any walk of life. Oh man, and he, so I'll leave the key word out. He went, "Yeah, you finished?" And he went, "Yeah." He went, "I'm his father." And the bloke, whoa, and off he went, and off he went.
And then imagine the guy's seen you as he's come out.
I know,
and as
said,
he's going, "Oh, no."
I know, but you don't tell me. Mates of mine will always say to me, "Yeah, it's like being shot, you know." People think, "Oh, that's a good story, but is it based on truth?" These things
are true.
They are, because you can tell alongside the mundanity of showbiz. And that's the odd thing about the book. It makes what I actually do for a living look less interesting than a rather notable home life.
And through it all runs this huge love of football. And I mentioned in the introduction, you presenting 606 and starting, making that show what it is. And now the show you do again with Danny Kelly, and you've been great muckers for ages. And you make football fun. You make football fun for those of us that don't actually like football that much, but anyway, have to. But you also, through all of this, became great mates with Paul Gascoigne.
Yeah, well, Gazza, we did. It's very celebrated, and of course that's a tragedy now, what happened to Paul. But that, again, you get slung together with who became the most famous footballer in the world. And I've met loads of footballers, but none of them like Paul, because it was nothing to do with football. I mean, all of us have that one reckless friend. Now, the stories I'm saying are pretty wild, but all of us have this friend who you think, man, sometimes you don't want them to turn up and think, "Oh, no, I was just going home." And they walk in and you think, "Oh, where are we going to go now?" But Paul was always extraordinary. He didn't really get on with other footballers. I remember the very first time I did meet him, we had to meet up because we were going to do a video together. And I'd never been to Wembley. I support Millwall. I'd never been to Wembley. And I was in, passes to the green room, the drinks place after the game. And we had to meet there. And he was very shy, and he was, that was the thing with him. That's what led on to all the other things. There was this pressure to be Gazza when he's actually Paul. So we were there, and he said, "Have you met?" And I won't say the bloke's name because it is rotten. He said, "Dan," he said, they all talk so weird, And I said, "What?" He said, "Watch." And the goal had been scored that night, a very well-known footballer. And he come up to us. He said, "Well done, good goal tonight." And he went, "Yeah, thanks, Paul. As luck would have it, I got 2 bites of the cherry." Came back off the keeper, and I managed to get a toe to it. And the linesman kept his flag down, and he's nudging me, going, "They all talk like that." And I thought, "Oh, you'll do for me." And the legion stories, and particularly the long, rambling story about that famous photograph of me, him, and Chris Evans.
Yeah.
And we didn't see each other all the time. I think it was extraordinary that we were three working-class blokes who didn't go to the Groucho. We didn't, have Ferraris. Well, Chris actually did. He had about 12. But we used to go to pubs, which is not the greatest thing for a sportsman to do, but we did. We used to go there, and so there'd be photos. And if they saw us a couple of days later, they'd been out for 2 days. All of that, of course, for me as a 30-odd-year-old bloke with kids, I knew how it worked, but it destroyed him. I haven't. And been out. Chris was the only one that could be out all night. But he was just the nicest bloke to be around, and he's had all kinds of tragedies and outrages, and we all know how this is all going to end. My number's never changed, not for 3 years I've heard from him. Used to get these calls, oh, not for 3 years. I think that's all part of he got surrounded by people who, it was in their interest to tell him he was a bad person, and what you do, you cut all contacts up. But it was just that brief 18 months when he was just terrific. He used to sleep at our house, and he'd never seen certain films we'd watch, but we'd come out in the morning and they'd take photos of you. We know how this works, and I'm not whining about it. And they'd run a photo of us both taking my son and my youngest daughter on the school run. But none of that. It'd just be the two of us looking terrible first thing in the morning, as you can are entitled to do, and say we've just been coming out of a club in Piccadilly. Now, I could say, I'll buy into that. Look, you're married to a playboy. But Gazza, actually, of course, it had repercussions for him and everything else. Didn't stop him, but he always used to sit there and go through newspapers and worry and fret and all of that. But yes, he is and remains my friend, but I ain't seen him for a very, very long time.
The thing I didn't realise until I read the book was I knew that you had written for Chris Evans, and I knew Danny's written for a lot of people. And most of the shows that you think were funny, he wrote them.
Bless you, thank you.
Or Paul wrote them.
None of the unfunny ones.
No, none of them. But what I didn't realise, that when you first started working in radio for GLR, it was Chris Evans who showed you how to...
That's how I met him.
How to drive a desk. And this is how stupid I am, despite the fact I've worked in radio since the very beginning. When I went to Radio 2, and they said to me, do you drive yourself? I said, well, I can, but isn't it easier to get a car in? And I didn't know they were talking about driving a desk, which is opening your own faders, playing in your own music and all that.
Mid-year of Ultravox tells a story very similar to that. He said, because they were very cool and Ultravox were happening, and, they wanted to direct their own video, which turned out to be Vienna, if you remember how arty that was. And they had these ideas, and they sat with the record company, and they told them about it, and Midge will tell this story, and he said, and at the end of it, they said, boys, you've got the vision, obviously. What you've got to do now is go out and bring us back a proper storyboard of that. And they all went, OK, we can do that. Yep, we can do that. They had no idea what a storyboard was. They went round to Ryman's and asked for one.
That's brilliant.
Those who don't know, storyboard is actually a shot-by-shot thing an artist will do to show. Yeah, they all went round to Ryman's and said, do you have any storyboards? Anyway, but Chris, I met... I was doing telly 8 years before radio.
Yeah,
and,
which is not the way people normally do it. I mean, it's not that there is a rule book for this.
But as I say, I've been doing, rock and roll for years before that. So, so then there's been a downward trajectory in it, and I'll be in rodeo next, and we can all go home. So, so I did. I said I'd do this show for him, because it was absolutely one of the few times when I've gone totally skinned. And VAT people knocked on the door to take stuff away. But it never bothered us. It really don't. So I thought, OK, what am I going to do with that? One story at a time then. But my old man, when he heard the VAT people had come round, and they said they'd come back at 5 o'clock to give me time to get the money. I eventually borrowed it off a brother-in-law, gave it all back to him later on. 15 grand they wanted. So my dad said, weren't they approachable? I said, that was his favourite word.
Doesn't work that way.
I said, not VAT people, they're notorious. Don't you worry about that. You just sort them out. I said, how do I know? He said, have a look outside. He said, ask if they came in, what car they come in. This is my old man's thinking. I said, what? He said, ask what car it is. He said, and look out the window and say, what car do you come in? And when they point it out, say, is that your car? And he said, no, that's his car. What do you drive? And if it's a better car, he's your man. Right? So I'm then supposed to get him away from him saying, if I'll give you 50 quid, can we forget about this? And the terrible thing is for my old man, that always worked. So I'm at GLR, this London radio station, and they said, can you work all these buttons like the Enterprise? Can you do all that yourself? I said, I don't know how that works. I said, it's OK, we'll get someone to sit alongside of you for the first couple of weeks and you just do that for you. And I felt a bit of a fraud. I thought, I hate radio shows, but they don't do that. But it was too confusing. So they picked up a phone in the studio and muttered into it and said, could you come down? And about a minute later, the door to the studio opens and in comes this tall 19-year-old ginger Mancunian. Hello, my name's Chris Evans. So I said, hello, mate, how you doing? He said, right, it's not going to take too long. And he showed me how to do it, and it turns out he'd only been in London a fortnight, and he was just doing shifts at the station, just, pulling buttons for people. And after the first one, we went across the road to a pub called the Marylebone Tap in Marylebone High Street. And we were sitting in there, and I'd been doing the 6 o'clock show, which had finished, and I was doing nothing. But a woman came across and said, excuse me, are you Danny Baker? So I said, yes. She went, oh, I used to watch you. I said, OK, just sign that, lovely. It wasn't a photos then, but did the signature. And it went away, and Chris said, well, I won't say what he said, but, it was bloody hell. He went, I can't believe, he said, what does that feel like? Because he'd never seen the 6 o'clock show living in Manchester, you know. He said, what does that feel like? I said, well, you know, you're on telly, very nice people come up to me. Wow, signing autographs, can't get my head around it. 18 months later, there's a photo of Chris, who now is Chris Evans. 18 months later, coming out of someplace. In the background is this rather balding, shambolic fella behind him. And it just said, Chris Evans leaves nightclub with blonde and his bootlicking entourage. And that, my friends, is as good a story I can tell you that there's no business like show business.
That is true.
And on that last thing, Claire, I promise, on that phrase,
Yeah.
I was interviewed by the Sunday Mirror. It's in there when I was doing loads of rotten, and I insist we call my back catalogue of variable quality. So I was doing this interview, and it was when everyone hated the Daz adverts and all of that. So she's interviewing this woman from the Mirror. And she went, how do you feel that some of the criticism you've had about Radio 1 and all of this? I said, well, you know what? Last year they were calling me a genius. And this year I'm the leper of the airwaves. Leper of the airwaves now, genius last year. All you can get from that is, you know, there's no business like show business. When it came out in the Daily Mirror, it said, Baker looks down at his drink and gets pensive when I ask him about criticism. I don't care if I'm a leper. I still say there's no business like show business. There's a difference, my friend.
Yes.
Anyway, but that and again is...
Context is everything. And
Yeah,
I think what you've learned from listening to Danny is there is nothing better than hearing someone's own voice tell their own stories. And that is what you get from the book. But given that I've mentioned that you have your chance to ask him and to ask Paul your own questions, I know that you will spend the interval while you're drinking thinking of good questions. And if you want to set Danny the equivalent of the Daz Challenge, you can. He mentioned it in passing. Many of us remember those adverts really clearly. So if you want to ask him a really difficult question, like a nerdy question, a question to which only he would know the answer, then do that as well. But ask him about anything that I may not have covered. For the time being, thank you so much to Danny Baker.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back your host, Clare Balding.
These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
I might have to try and perfect that. I can't do humour, but I certainly can't do physical humour. The extraordinary thing, when you get to meet up with a whole load of authors and you've all got books out at the same time, we all go on the same circuit. So there are recognised events that you go and do. So Ely Cathedral, Toppings organise a very, very good event at Ely Cathedral. And I'm scared of bats. And Ely Cathedral at 9 o'clock at night, that is not a good place to be for a person who's scared of bats. But fantastic reception, always very, very welcoming. You then get the odd stops. And the oddest of the lot is Milton Keynes. Generally the oddest of the lot. But the shopping centre at Milton Keynes, which actually has the concrete cows, plus a tree where the concrete cows are grazing. And the tree was listed, and they were meant to protect the tree, and I don't think any of them have noticed the tree's dead. It's definitely dead. And next to the concrete cows and the dead tree is a pick and mix that's the size of this stage. And I love a pick and mix, I really do, very much. But it's really unhealthy because it's open. So like anyone could sneeze or snot or do anything all over the pick and mix, I know. But the shop that I was signing at in Milton Keynes Shopping Centre, they always provide security when you go and do your signings. I have no idea what they think we are at danger of, but given that I'd walked 2 miles from one end of the shopping centre to the other on my own, I felt I could probably walk the 2 miles back again. But Sean, who had recently completed his close contact training, Sean was glued to my side. And every shopper in the Milton Keynes Shopping Centre who was going about their business perfectly normally was, I think, quite shocked to see anyone, they didn't know who I was, but some woman with this security guard clearly stuck to her arm. So Sean walked me back through to my car, where Sketch, who's my driver, had said as we arrived at the Milton Keynes shopping centre, "Have you ever done a book signing when no one turned up?" I said, "No, Sketch, not yet, but thanks." And that evening, so we were doing Milton Keynes on the way to Birmingham to do a theatre in Birmingham. And Milton Keynes, London, Milton Keynes, Birmingham is quite straightforward, actually, if the M1 is open and the M6 is open. It was the day/night that neither were open. And there were 4-hour tailbacks, and people really struggled if they were trying to get to anywhere, actually, let alone go and see anything on time. So we actually ended up hopping on a train at Coventry. Should have just got on the train from Milton Keynes. That would have been the sensible thing. It goes straight to Birmingham. Didn't think of that, and obviously Sketch is waiting outside with more words of doom. But while we're stuck in the traffic, Poppy, who works for publicity for Penguin, who published my book, we are telling then book tour disaster stories. And to cheer me up, she tells me about an author who goes to Canada to promote his book. And out in the wilds of Canada, snow all around, he's doing a school hall for hopefully a gathering of 50 people, let's hope. 50 people is a good turnout for a book event. That's why it's such a thrill to be here and see all of you. It's fantastic. I can't tell you how pleased I am. But I think of this author in Canada, and one person turned up, and she was drunk. And consequently, she fell asleep. And he was reading from his book, and she's fallen asleep, and he thinks, what do I do? Do I carry on reading? What do I do? And he looks up, and there are windows of the school hall. He looks at this frozen window to see a moose licking the window. It's just one of my favourite visions ever. So anyone who comes out on stage and gets the greeting that you gave to Danny Baker is going to be bloody thrilled. And I know that Paul Merton is dying to come on, and I want to give him the big introduction because he is an extraordinary talent, and he's been on our television screens for such a long time that you kind of forget how good he is and how much it takes to have done Whose Line Is It Anyway and do that improv comedy, but also to do Have I Got News For You for as long as he has done and do it as well as he does. He's won a BAFTA, he's won 5 British Comedy Awards, and he has been voted by the discerning readers of The Guardian as one of the 10 greatest wits of all time. So please, a massive round of applause for Paul Merton.
How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you. Fantastic.
Are you happy with your walk-on music?
I'm very happy with the walk-on music. Chopin was commissioned to write the series music for Just a Minute. He was thrilled. Him and Nicholas had a few discussions about it, about how the music should go. Before I should mention Nicholas, he is actually the only person currently working in show business who's mentioned in the Bible. So.
And still going strong.
Still going strong.
Paul's latest autobiography is called Only When I Laugh, and it is available now. And consequently, you haven't done Milton Keynes Shopping Centre yet.
Not yet, no.
That delight awaits you. Or you could just say no.
I like the idea of the moose licking the window, actually.
Go to Canada. You say in here that the job that gives you most professional pleasure is Just a Minute, which is why we played that theme tune. And for those of you that have never listened to it on Radio 4, you really should. But essentially, you have to speak for a minute without deviation, repetition, or hesitation. And Nicholas Parsons is the host, and he decides whether or not.
Yes, he's the
you have
arbiter.
Completed the task. And you're very good at it because your brain really loves that kind of a challenge.
Yes, I suppose so. And I remember listening to it as a kid as well. When it first started, I was I suppose I was 10 years old when it started. And it was one of those programs that children like it because it's very easy to understand the rules, but very difficult to play. So, like all good games, it seems simple until you start to give it a go. And when I was living in the bedsits in Streatham in the 1980s, and I trying to do little bits of cabaret work here and there, and I didn't have a television, but I used to tape Just a Minute off the radio and listen to it every other day, And on Radio 4 Extra about a year ago, I heard one of these episodes of Just a Minute that I'd recorded with Kenneth Williams, as Danny was mentioning earlier, and I just knew it word for word. I'd clearly heard it so many times, it sort of sunk into my sort of consciousness. But that's the sort of thing I was doing when I was sort of trying to sort of get going on the circuit, trying to become a comedian, as it were.
And when you first started trying to become a comedian, the Comedy Store is where you went, and you were part of the Comedy Store Players. An incredibly talented group of individuals, but what you loved about it was that challenge, the live performance. Julian Clary remains one of your very great friends.
Yes, that's a picture from the Big Fun show, actually, a radio show that I did. But yeah, there's Josie Lawrence is there, and Julian Clary and Neil Malarkey at the back. So that was Danny was talking about sort of luck in his life, you know, and you do, even if you have a burning ambition, as I did from a very early age, you have to have the luck to first of all have the temperament to be able to sort of pull it off, and also you have to have the chances where people have to give you, you know, offer you the jobs and things. So something like the Big Fun Show, oh, that picture's gone again. I would just have a mirror here, shouldn't I? So I sort of see what's happening. But yeah, so Just a Minute was one of those things.
It's back again. As soon as you said it's back again.
Yeah, so the Big Fun Show. So, but my greatest memory was the 1958 World Cup final between Brazil and Sweden. And just look at this, the last goal here, you'll see is... See, for that for me says football. So yeah, so Just a Minute, yeah.
But you still go back to Comedy Store?
Yeah, I still do the Comedy Store Players. I think it's important to... the Comedy Store Players is an improv thing, which the Who's Line sort of programme sort of came out of partly. And I do it every Sunday. The reason being that it sort of keeps you match fit, essentially. You know, so when I do Have I Got News For You or Just a Minute, I've not been away from improvisation for a while. And improvising on stage in front of a live audience, as we have here, it's the most honest of all the disciplines, really. There's no fakery involved. You're either funny in improvisation or you're not. You can't sort of, in TV terms, you can put laughter on it or disguise lack of content by cutting around it, you know. But that's what I like about it. It's a sort of the cold face of comedy, really. And if you can sort of pull it off there, then it sort of feeds into everything else.
And do you know, because obviously covering sport, I know how many things affect performance, whether it's nutrition or sleep or training or illness or injury or whatever. Do you find there are days when you're really on it and days when, for some reason, you're just not quite?
Yes, and that's when you have to fake it. You have to sort of, you know, you still have to be able to do it, even if you don't feel like it, you know. So it's, but that's just like any routine you get into, you know. It can't be, every sportsman has different sort of rhythms and biorhythms, whatever. So they can't all feel like this is going to be my time, this is going to be the time that I succeed. But the best... The most consistent are the ones that sort of can replicate that form time and time again. So it's something to do with, I suppose, discipline, your intention, how hard you want to work on something, and just how good you are at something. Did you have a natural ability for it, I suppose?
And you get better at it. Practice makes
yes,
you
like
better.
anything. You know, the first time, I mean, when I started off, when I was about sort of 4 years old, I wanted to be a comedian. I saw some clowns in a circus, and I was knocked out by the funniness of clowns. And I grew up watching sort of TV programs like Arthur Haynes' show, and I listened to the Goons. And so I was trying to absorb as much comedy as I could, you know, because it seemed to me that first experience in the circus, there's 3,000 people in Olympia, Bertram Mills Circus, and just seeing clowns with big boots and hair that went up at the side, and throwing buckets of water over each other, and cars where the doors fell off, and you threw a string of sausages at somebody. I mean, I was used to sort of the Catholic Church and priests and things, you know, and most of the priests didn't behave like that, not that we were aware of it at the time. And so it was a big surprise, you know. It was like a real sort of, a little sort of look into the adult world, that adults could actually do things purely for the sense of fun.
And was it that love of clowns that made you stalk Michael Crawford?
Stalk is a strong word.
Yep.
So is Michael. Michael's a very strong word. And Crawford, yes, it was my love of silent clowns and comedy and stuff. When Some Mothers Do Have 'Em started, the character he used to do, Frank Spencer, they had these rather extraordinary stunts and things that he would do, like hanging off the edge of a cliff on the edge of or the bumper of a car, or roller skating underneath a sort of articulated lorry. So I was very in tune with what he was doing. And he was in this musical at the Drury Lane called Billy Liar, which was based on the Keith Waterhouse book, which is about a boy living in Leeds who dreams of becoming a scriptwriter for television. So all those things were obviously just meant for me to go and see. You know, it just fed so much into my sort of desire. But I was about 16, 17. I didn't know anybody. Unlike Danny, I didn't sort of have a sort of exuberant family life. We didn't talk about anything really, my family, you know. I only found out I was related to my dad about 2 years before he died. But... no, that's not quite true, sorry. No, but my dad didn't have much of an emotional vocabulary, so he didn't talk about pride and things like that, you know. Part of that generation, perhaps, I don't know. But I can't remember how I got into all that.
Michael Crawford.
Oh yeah, Michael Crawford. Yeah. So they go on holiday, and so I read in the paper that Michael Crawford jogs through Hyde Park every morning to keep him fit, you know, training for this musical. So I get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I sit on a bench in Hyde Park. You know, and Hyde Park, as you know, is huge. So I picked the obvious bench that he would run past. And I sat there for maybe an hour and a half as the mists slowly cleared and the summer sun came up. And, you know, of
How
course
long did you do this for, Paul?
Oh, I just did that for one day. It was only one day.
Oh, that's not committed at all.
It's not, no. It wasn't proper stalking.
No.
And even if, I don't know what I was doing there. If he had run past me, I wouldn't have been able to stop him. I was an incredibly shy individual. I would have just, like looking in a fish tank, I'd have seen him swim past in a different world that I was unable to get into. So it was just, this again was a time, 1974, 75, there were no comedy clubs in London. So to be a comedian, wanting to be a comedian in 1974 was the equivalent of saying you wanted to be the first man on Mars or something. It was ludicrous. There were no comedy clubs in London. You had comedy clubs in the north, you know, the sort of Bernard Manning type of thing, which wouldn't have been any good to me, a Londoner, shy London boy. And that was it, really. So until the Comedy Store opened in 79 and opened up this opportunity to get stage time, because that's the key thing. You can be wanting to be a comedian, you can read all the showbiz books, you can look at people you admire, but until you actually get on stage in front of an audience, then you've only got theory. You have to start putting it into practice.
And what's the biggest buzz of doing that? Why is it addictive?
Oh, it's just great. It's sort of, but the improv thing particularly, when you don't really know what you're going to be doing from one moment to the next. So you could for a minute be a giraffe that's a Stephen King fan. The next minute you could be an insurance salesman trying to sort of organise cover on a yacht or something. You know, you could be anything in any scene. And you're on stage with other people. So you have the camaraderie of the situation. So it's never the same thing. So that's why I love it. It's playtime, basically. It's my favourite bit of school when the lessons stopped and you went out and played. That's kind of what we do. And we have the nerve to charge 15 quid for people to come and see it.
Exactly.
But I think that's kind of the appeal of it, I think.
You tell the story in here about the beginning of Have I Got News for You?
Ooh.
And the fact that actually you just said immediately, that's not for me. I don't do topical jokes. In fact, I know nothing about current affairs.
Yes.
So who talked you into doing it?
Well, Jimmy Mulville, the producer, said, well, can you be funny? I said, yes, I suppose so. He said, well, you can be funny about Michael Heseltine then, or whatever it was that he said at the time. And it was good casting, because Ian, of course, is very political, but knows nothing about the news, it appears. I mean, we've tried him over 45 series. I don't know how many more tests he needs, but... but Ian's a very funny man, as well as being very sort of, principled about certain stuff, like freedom of the press, very important. So that it sort of merged as a unit fairly early on. So it's one of those things where it doesn't look particularly exciting on paper, but you put the chemistry together, or you put the two or three people together, and suddenly it clicks in a way which you wouldn't necessarily assume just by, thinking about it theoretically.
And everything was going along merrily, and Angus Dayton was hosting, and you and Paul, you and Ian are team captains.
Yes.
And then a story breaks in the News of the World, and you write about it in here about Angus. And you, on the very next show, because obviously it's a topical news quiz, you have to do the story that's been front page of the News of the World. So you decide you're going to broach it straight away. Let's make fun. We're going to give you a hard time because that's it. And still, that is the formula used. Jimmy Carr did it, straight after his troubles with the press. But at the end of the show, you exposed this T-shirt, and this photo is from the book. I mean, that's very...
Well, you see, I'm wearing a fleece there, and the idea was to sort of without going into all the total details of the story, clearly the thing was, one of the producers said to me, what are we going to do? Are you going to mention it? I said, well, we have to mention it because it's, as you say, it's been all over the tabloid newspapers. And if we don't mention it first, if somebody in the audience mentions it or one of the guests mention it, it makes us look like we're hiding from it or something. We just really have to sort of confront it, just really sort of and it'll be really embarrassing for him and it'll be terrible, but it'll be for one show. And then after that we can sort of move on, which kind of worked for a while, and then other factors came in and it became impossible to maintain that as a sort of narrative. But the idea, and Angus did appreciate it afterwards. He said to me after the recording, thank you for making the whole thing funny, because that was the approach. Show him suffer a bit, make it funny, laughs at his expense. I mean, the T-shirt thing with the fleece I revealed it right at the end. There was a moment early on when I could have done it, but I thought then I'm stuck with it. So no, it's only in the last minute that you see that. To get the joke, to get the shock, and then to get him looking a bit, pissed off. And then the idea was then carry on from there, but which worked the following week, and we were okay the week after that. But then there was a gap in the series, and something else happened, and it became more difficult.
Yeah, and I think when Christine Hamilton turns around to him and basically says, "You can't call my husband a disgrace, look at you," then you're in trouble. 3 months before
Yes, you are.
the great arbiter of morals of the world.
Yes. When the Hamiltons can look at you and go, naughty boy.
3 months, and only 3 months before Have I Got News for You started, or the offer came through,
Yes.
you were in the Maudsley,
Yes.
seriously ill,
Yes.
not knowing what is happening to your head.
Yes.
I mean, you were, and it's, I mean, seriously, a brilliant chapter, and it is written in the present tense, and you read it, and you're thinking all the things you're thinking, and moving the way you're moving, and you were incapable of sitting in a chair, and it is just complete paranoia caused by...
Well, it was... I was going to try to think of a jokey reply then, because it was such a strong build-up. I was going to say that it was an allergic reaction to Joe Pasquale, but actually... but I ignored that impulse.
Did you?
Or did I? Well, no, what it was it was a very bad an extremely bad reaction to anti-malarial pills. I'd been working very hard with Julian Clary, writing a show called Sticky Moments, which was one of the first things he did on telly. And I was also writing my sketch show for Channel 4. And of course, these were to be writing stuff for television. You know, writing a sketch where you write a cowboy parody of something, and somebody goes and gets a cowboy costume, and there's a horse, and there's a zebra over here that you've written down, and somebody provides it, and you're filming all that. You know, the prospect of that was so exciting. That and working with Julian, I was working quite hard. But I decided to, and I was also doing Whose Line at the same time as well, so I was doing 3 major things. And I decided to go on holiday to Kenya just around about Christmas time as a sort of break from it all before I started filming my own show, which had all been written up. And I started taking these anti-malarial drugs, and you take them about 5 days before you go, during the whole time you're there, and 6 weeks after you come back. And I noticed something in the Whose Line Was It show. There was a shot at the end of the programme. This was a show where there were 6 of us doing the show, that particular Christmas special it was. And the director's got a sort of camera on a boom that's going to swoop over the audience and swoop along the faces of the people that are sitting in the chair, the contestants. And if you ever see that show, it goes very, very quickly, because the guy that's wearing my jacket isn't me, it's the floor manager. Because just towards the end of the recording, I found it impossible to sit in the chair. I didn't know, I could get up, I could improvise, I could wander over here, I could stand and do all sorts of things. The one thing I couldn't do was when we just need the final shot, and I'd sort of go and sit down and go, and I started sweating, and I have to get up and then walk around again. And it seemed very odd, but I didn't worry about it. Just thought, I don't know what that was, a panic attack. I'd never had one before. I go on holiday. I buy a book at the Heathrow on my way to Kenya, a book about the Freemasons. I'm not particularly interested in the Freemasons, but suddenly I find I am interested in the Freemasons. So I start reading about the Freemasons. At one point, I read that the Freemasons run their own minicab company in South London. And the next day, when I'm trying to check this in the book, the words have disappeared. I can't find them anywhere in this book. So I come back home, and the filming's due to start in a couple of weeks. And then one Saturday, I go down, and I'm still taking the anti-malarial drugs. And of course, at this point, I have no idea that there's anything wrong with these anti-malarial pills or there's any reaction. I go down to the corner shop on the corner of the road, and there's one of those little sort of convenience stores. And I walk into the shop, and I walk in like this, and the guy looks up at me, and I look at him, and I think, what's wrong with that bloke? Why is he looking at me like that? I'm going to go out the shop. No, I don't have to go out the shop. I can come back in. I can stay in the shop if I want. No, he's looking at me again. Okay, I'm going to go out the shop. I'm definitely going out the shop. No, why should I go out the shop? I'm staying here. And then I look up at him, and I think, he's looking at me oddly. What's the matter with him? Because I can't see how odd I'm behaving. I'm creating oddness in him because I'm walking in and out the shop, and I'm looking at him. So I come running out of the shop. I run down the corner. I run down the centre of the street where I used to live. And there's houses either side, and I imagine, and I feel, or I detect, or I'm certain that the curtain's all twitching open like a Mexican wave as I'm going along. Each curtain's looking at me as I'm going like that. I get into the flat where I'm living with my girlfriend, Julie. I'm convinced I know everything that's going to be played on the radio. I know what that song is going to be. And the next song is going to be, and I don't know what it is, but as soon as it starts, I say, yes, I knew it was going to be that. She gets really sort of worried and concerned because I was behaving very strangely. And I get taken to the Maudsley Hospitals, a psychiatric hospital in Denmark Hill, and where the adventures really began.
And you were there for how long?
About 6 weeks in total, about 2 months. 10 days the first time, 6 weeks for the second time. I was in there twice. You sort of get... it was my favourite chapter in the book. I remember at the time, thinking this is going to be a good chapter one day in my autobiography.
As it's all happening.
As I handed over the contents of my pockets and
Mm.
signed a form saying I wasn't going to be a threat to anybody. But humour does come into it, in these dark places where you sometimes find yourself. There's a lot of people in psychiatric hospitals believe that people on television are talking to them directly through the screen. Now, I was in the Maudsley Hospital at the same time they started putting out Whose Line Is It Anyway? So on a Friday night, I'm pretending to be a mushroom in Spain on the telly, and Saturday morning, I'm queuing up for my breakfast in the Maudsley canteen. There's two, basically for breakfast you get either a soft-boiled egg, it's a hard-boiled egg in a shell. No, peeled, that's right, it was peeled, no shell. So you get a hard-boiled egg that's been peeled, or a bowl of bran flakes and a sort of cardboard plate with a plastic spoon and a little glass of orange juice. There's no hot drinks or anything that could scald or anything like that. And the guy next to me, 19-year-old boy next to me, suddenly recognises me as the guy that he's seen on the television the night before. And he's standing next to me like this. And he suddenly turns to me really nervously, and he says, are you Paul Merton? Now, I wasn't best placed to deny it, so I was the least effective person to deny it. But I realised I had a responsibility here. So I said, I'm being a bit quiet here. I'm just having a bit of a break. Nobody really knows I'm here. And I sort of tried to sort of give him the idea that we're sort of sharing a secret. I mean, I could have said to him, when he said, "What are you doing here?" I could have said, "I've just jumped out the telly."
It's good that you didn't, though.
But I didn't do that.
No. I think it's good
But,
that you didn't.
but so there was another time we're having a group therapy session, and there's a new guy joins the group. So every morning for 45 minutes you sit around and people are talking about their variously difficult problems. One guy, he's got long hair, parted in the middle, shoulder-length hair, a beard. It's not a real surprise when he announces to the group that he's Jesus. But this annoys another guy because he says he's Jesus, this guy over here. So we have two Jesuses arguing over which one is the real Jesus. The other guy's a little short, fat guy, so he doesn't really look like Jesus. So another one of the patients say, "No, I think you're the real Jesus." So he's got a couple of followers going. It's sort of, get the momentum. So things like that happen. There's no other way around it when you're sort of feeling you've gone through some sort of mental thing. And eventually the doctor discovered, he said, "Well, look, you seem to be going a little bit more manic every sort of Friday." And then we looked at these anti-malarial pills. And there was the weekly pill that I took on a Friday and the daily one. The daily one was absolutely fine. It was the weekly one. And it was true, the first time I went to the Maudsley was a Saturday. Other incidents happened on a Friday and a Saturday. So it was entirely down to that. Yeah. But yes, and as it occurs in the book, it comes out of nowhere. Because everything seems to be going really smoothly and swimmingly. Yeah. And then suddenly we're into that area,
And it could have, the way television works, the way we're all victims of fashion, whether people like us or not, and whether they think you're it or not, we're all very aware it may not last until tomorrow, frankly.
Yes.
It could have all finished then. It didn't because of Have I Got News For You, and because Whose Line Is It Anyway was such a huge success.
Yes.
Equally, Have I Got News For You could have ended, and lots of people thought it might, when Angus was taken off as host. But what happened then was the turning circle of guest hosts. And you talk in here about the best of them and the worst of them, and then actually having just skimmed through the questions that people have put in, a lot of them are about that.
Yes.
You particularly pick out Bruce Forsyth and William Shatner as two of the best stand-in hosts. And Brucey, a bit like Nicholas Parsons.
Yes.
My God, you have to admire anyone who's managed in showbiz for as long as they have.
He's incredibly talented. He has a huge array of talent, Bruce. He is extraordinary. And so, when we played, he came on to host Have I Got News For You. He phoned me up. I'd never really met him before. And he phoned me up and said, "Hello, Paul, it's Bruce here." Bruce says he doesn't talk like this, but he does. He said, "I'm just watching that show of yours. Have I Got News?" I've said to them, "I could host that, couldn't I?" She said, "Yes, you could." And I thought I'd give you a ring, see what you thought. And I thought, well, he'd be great hosting it. The producers at first were a bit sort of dubious. I said, look, it'll be fantastic. He'll read the article, he'll time all the jokes. He came on, we played a version of Play Your Iraqi Cards Right, which was him showing cards of various wanted terrorists at the time and the price tag on their head, to Ian's absolute dismay, because Ian didn't know the show Play Your Cards Right, because Ian's DNA won't accept ITV. So, in fact, he had the ITV button removed from his set by Harrods. So there was no danger that any of that would creep in. So he had no idea what was going on at all, which was, of course, hilarious. But then William Shatner, you grew up watching Captain Kirk's Star Trek when you're 8, 9, 10, and one day he's hosting a television show that you're on, and just out of nowhere, he suddenly announces that Ilfracombe is riddled with prostitution.
What, he just did that off his own bat?
Yeah, it wasn't in the script. He just... It came up as a news story, and he said, yes, I hear it's riddled with prostitution. The head of the Ilfracombe Tourist Board got in touch with him the following few days, and there was a bit of a tweet exchange between the two of them where he said, do you have any evidence that Ilfracombe is riddled with prostitution? And he came back with them all at it down there or something like that.
Has very colourful houses, Ilfracombe. Maybe he just got confused.
That is incredibly surreal. That
Yes.
Captain Kirk you should be next to somebody, as you know, as Captain Kirk, who tells you Ilfracombe's riddled with prostitution. I mean,
I also think it's intriguing reading this, and obviously you study, you have worked very hard. You've worked hard your whole life, but you study comedy. You are a student of it, is what I mean. And
it is a fascinating subject, you know.
And how and why it works, and that silent comedians could be funny without, obviously, the power of speech.
And it's a mixture of a science and an art, you know. My wife Suki wrote a play earlier this year that we did in Edinburgh, which was a great joy to do. And a written play as opposed to an improv show. Like an improv show, obviously you don't get to do the same thing twice, so you're just making it up as you go along. But in the play, you get to do it the same again, and you're trying to make it work. And you suddenly discover there's an extra laugh if you just sort of turn your head at a certain point. Why is that funny there at that point? You don't know why, but you got a laugh yesterday, so you try it again. And the audience doesn't laugh today. And you think, well, why didn't they laugh today? Then you think, well, maybe there was something I did where I predicted the laugh in some way, you know? Because it's sort of the relationship between the audience and the stage performer is the most honest of all, you know, as I was saying earlier, because you don't fake your response. It's funny or it isn't. It seemed to be the same yesterday, but it wasn't. So what did I do wrong? So what did I do different? So all that kind of stuff I just find endlessly fascinating, you know.
I think it's why, as I said right at the beginning, I think it's why sharing live performance is the most exciting thing of all. And having the opportunity to have Paul Merton and Danny on stage at the same time is too good to resist. So let's welcome him back, because we're going to ask him your questions. Danny Baker!
Danny Baker!
He's going to come that way. Were you? Oh, thanks. Brilliant.
Thank you, everyone.
Is that this week's milk bill?
I said, give that
I know,
to,
look,
give that to
matching
Clare on
caps.
the
Do you
way
want to
in.
wear your caps? You can both wear your caps if you like.
No, I don't like people to know I'm bald.
Don't you?
You've started off badly with that one, then.
I know.
I tell you what, I have not yet done the sort of derivation of my surname, but I'm pretty sure there's plenty of my
of
family.
course,
Exactly.
of
Have to be. And also, I shared with the audience last night, and probably shouldn't have done that, when I was at school studying for exams, I used to wear a thinking hat. And so when the question came from the audience, what do you wear when you write? I don't actually now, but that's the only thing.
A thinking cap?
Yeah, I used to wear a cap
Literally?
that keep my brains in, I thought. And I was like 17. It's not like I was 6. Anyway, questions from our wonderful audience. And I don't know, why is your Twitter handle @Prodnose?
Prodnose. Well, I think we've got this in common. I hope we still have. We don't have mobile phones.
That's right. No, I don't have mobile
Paul
phones.
and I are the only two people who don't have mobile phones. We don't,
Robert
socialise.
Elms doesn't have one either.
Robert Elms. But
He told
people
me,
say to me, can I have your number? And I'll say, do you know what? I don't have a phone. And in this game, they say, I promise I won't give it to anyone. I say, I really don't. And I always say, the only other person is Paul Merton. I always say that because we don't.
No.
And it's not an affectation. I have no philosophy behind it, but I can't think of anything worse than always being contactable. And I don't. People buy them for us. I know. Anyway, but I have a computer. I don't think you do have a computer, though, do you? I do. I like computer stuff.
I'm looking at the pencil a bit dubiously.
And so I'm not Facebook, I'm not any of that, but Twitter, 2 or 3 people, friends of mine, said it's because we was always forever emailing each other. And they said, go on Twitter, you can do that. And so I did, and I've never liked to say my own name, which is odd. On the radio, I was called Candyman. I just think it all makes my toes curl when you hear people going, you're listening to, all right, get over, play the record. I can talk, but I don't like Sam Onan. So I thought, I'm going to, the real Danny Baker, which is what you're supposed to do, and register yourself. Prodnose, one of my favourite authors, and the only real, the what?
J.B. Morton?
Yes, the only real influence on Spike Milligan is J.B. Morton, Beachcomber. who wrote the most extraordinary comedy, the most wonderful Flights of Fancy, where you can see where the goons came from, wrote a column in the Daily Express for 40 years, 50 years?
Something like 50, I think, yeah.
And, but he had this one character called Prodnose, who was a really irritating person who popped up to say things nobody wants to hear. And it's a slim conceit, but I didn't know it would take off like Prodnose has, and I am at Prodnose. So Prodnose was really just a slight and in-joke for someone who's a bit of a nuisance. And that's
Very good. Well, that makes perfect sense.
There you go.
Right, Paul, this is part question, part challenge. I will time it. If you had just a minute to talk about your life, how would you summarise it? 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, normally I'd get some kind of warning that I was talking about just a minute earlier on, and I would say that my life is the subject which I'm allowed to repeat. This would be quite boring, because already I've done 50 seconds, not even anywhere near the subject in kind, but I've repeated the subject 3 times now. But anyway, no, I can't actually.
You're only thinking time. We weren't going to get you on repetition.
No,
because it was just the time. Anyway, we did do 35 minutes before, and he was jolly good on his life. Danny, this is one of your... this is like the dance
Who's going to win the cup?
What's the collective noun for a group of zebras?
Do what, mate?
What's the collective noun for a group of zebras, or zebras, however you
barcode.
Oh, I don't. The idea that I know, like QI, I don't. I mean, I manufacture stacks of stuff that I, people say, how did you know that? I say, well, I made it up. But what I can do, and what and Paul is more expert at, is hearing something from that and hijacking it to make it sound like you know what it is. So, yes, you see, I'm not answering the question, but I'll say, if I was on the radio now, what you do, you hear the word zebras and you say, I'll tell you what, never mind about the collective noun, the name of zebras, don't you worry about that. Why don't you see zebras being ridden? They're horses. You never see anyone on a zebra. If you go onto Google, there are no photographs.
But the sad thing is, I know the answer to that, because obviously it's a horse-related question.
Well, even so. But to hijack
their backs are made of paper.
But their backs.
You see, there's both
stripy paper.
The stripy paper.
From what could be, with all respect, a dry question of general knowledge, we would hijack and say, never mind about the real answer, here's something you can say. And zebras you don't see ridden, and now we know it's because their backs are made for paper. And that's how we get away with it, you see.
Very good. Very good.
Trade secrets.
Who would you like, this question for both of you, who would you like to play you in a movie or TV series of your
Harry Styles
life?
or One Direction?
Yes, of course.
Do you know, I have a penchant for Julie Andrews.
Do you?
Yeah.
I think she'd be great.
I'm not going to do an audiobook for this one, but I would like to get someone like Nigel Havers to read it.
Exactly.
I was born in Fulham. Son of a tube driver.
Am I older than you? Because we're both 1957, aren't we?
July the 9th for me.
I'm June the 22nd, son.
There we go.
Junior.
Yeah, well, both Cancerians at the same pot there. There you go.
Who are your radio heroes, and would either of you ever run for DG of the BBC?
Oh, well, I think we both agree on the second one. Well, maybe you would.
I don't know, who would you say?
The weird thing is, I never listened to the radio. The radio was never on in our house. People said, oh, you must listen to Kenny Everett. The Goons I learned from LPs. Most of the comedy on Hancock from LPs. I was never a radio listener. And thank God, because when I came to do radio, I took in a big box of records, and because they weren't paying much money, and those early shows, and still do, and I thought you just opened up the microphone and made stuff up and talked to people and had a conversation. I've never had a meeting about radio before, during, or after a show ever. And it's led to some crop-ups. But I just thought, that's what people did. I thought you just brought in records and did it. And it's strange, but we never had a car, so there was never a radio on in the car. Two-way family favourites and things like that my mum would listen to. But actually, as a radio fan, no, I never did. I was never a radio listener. Now I know, of course, I could make all the right noises and say John Peel, Kenny Everett. But did I listen to him at the time? No, I really didn't.
I mean, there's one thing at the moment, I would say there's a current show, Ed Reardon's Week on Radio 4. It's just absolutely superb and would bear comparison with the greats from any era. It's absolutely wonderful.
See, I love Lisa Tarbuck on a Saturday night, because I just think it's so wonderfully random. And I love, I just love the way...
Well, her brain goes anywhere. It just jumps around. It's fantastic.
The great benefit, again, that I had is when I was thrown into that maelstrom at GLR, it happened to be that I did Saturday and Sunday, and I was followed on Saturdays by Chris Morris, who couldn't, yeah, so I used to do my show, and then Chris Morris used to come and doing that, by the way. And on Sunday, it was Chris Evans. That was his first show. They hated each other, Chris Morris and Chris Evans. I was friends to both of them. But so then when I started, I thought, oh, there's other ways that some people prepare, some people do it different ways. And even though, as I say, I heard it from LPs and stuff, later on, you owe it to yourself to go back and say people like B. Mitchell Reed in America, who taught me so much from an LP called Cruising. You talk fast, and you get in there, and you get out, and you don't bore us, you get to the chorus, and you're not there to appear, you're there to work. Yeah. And if the audience listen to the radio, and, you know, back then, you know, vainglorious about it, but I always think, in whatever you do, this modern thing about, we're here for you, you tell us what you think. Now, hang on, you're getting paid, you do it. Show me you're doing something I couldn't do. That's all I ever want to hear.
Yeah. This makes me laugh. Is there any sex in your book? Which pages? Having read them both, no.
No, the first one there was.
Yeah.
And for the telly, we've had to age it all up and down and make it less. Because I was knocking around doing stuff, and I hate to say it, at 13, 14. Because I was never one of them I was shy around girls. No, I wasn't. No. I really wasn't. I don't know about you, Paul. I weren't. And you know,
I still haven't got to the stage that you were at when you were 14, believe you me.
Well, anyone who's read the first one knows there's a story about being round me nans where I was supposed to be feeding the budgerigar.
Yeah, and it's been called a few things in its time, hasn't it? Getting the millet out.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Rattling the cage.
I know. Stroking the cuttlefish.
Yeah, exactly.
But, so, yes, there is in mine.
Spilling trill all over. Anyway, we've been there.
It'll made me bounce with joy. But
yes.
Yes, there is in mine, but I only because I was fed up of reading the same generic stuff about, I was always awkward around girls, and that. I never was, and my friends on the estate were all girls. And terrible thing is, but there's made a record show, you see, I was quite a good-looking kid. Look, behold the ruins of a once great beauty. But again, I may have been too much my father's child there.
David Essex' brother.
David Essex's brother.
That's
well
right.
done, Paul. Thank you. Yeah, that's right.
Question for Paul: where do you buy your shirts? I hope you don't buy them. I mean, not that. Sorry, that sounded wrong.
You can around the back of Skips, back of hotels. I don't know where this one's from. Probably John Lewis, something like that. But I don't know. I'm not very. I'm dressed nicely today, but my wife's thrown clothes at me which fit and match.
Dressed.
You know, and dressed. So yeah, I don't know. I'm afraid.
Yes.
Scandinavia is the right answer.
Always. And you both got great shoes, can I say?
Oh, this is
Interesting
true. Yes,
shoes.
yes, absolutely.
Interesting shoes, and indeed sensible to run if there was a fire. Red sauce or brown or none? Who asked that question? Lots of people. You did that back there, and you did as well, yeah. I'll tell you something that Danny was doing red sauce, brown sauce or none with Willie Carson, my old mucker on the BBC, who I adored working with, and who, by the way, I do write about in my book, in case you need to know. Anyway, thanks. And Willie's on the phone to Danny doing it, doing the thing, red sauce, brown sauce, or no sauce, in our compound at Epsom on Derby Day. And I've gone over to the breakfast, you know, we get a nice breakfast when we're on OBs. And I come over to Willie, not knowing what he's doing. I said, what do you want in your sausages? Ketchup, brown sauce, or no sauce? To which he goes, that's just what I'm doing, and then says on the air, she's just asked me. He's going, don't tell her.
The things like the sausage sandwich, I mean, well, I kind of had half an idea that had run for about 4 or 5 weeks. I think you've heard it, Paul, but it's simply asking people what they have. Building it up like a quiz and coming up with preposterous questions. Actually started when I used to write TFI Friday for Chris Evans. And we used that, and extraordinarily, funny, we were talking about in the first part, from Michael Caine come on, and I used to come up, no, really, Michael Caine and Terry Venables. We did it on there twice, and I always thought that's a good thing, but Chris would chuck things away. Come on, let's keep it moving, let's do something new, and just 1 week on there, I like the idea that things can be so dumb, so absolutely banal, they're brilliant. And a lot of radio stops that side of it, and they remain dumb and banal. But if you treat the most ludicrous things with great seriousness, and the key to that is, of course, doing it with great seriousness. I think it was G.K. Chesterton said, somber is easy. Frivolous is really difficult. Everyone wants to be taken seriously. If you blow that up and say, I don't want to. So the sausage sandwich game, coming up with the questions it's rather like what Paul does so expertly, and I have to do only once a week. On the train, on the Jubilee line to the studio, I trust that the most fatuous questions will occur to us. when you walk out your front door, do you turn left or right if you're going to buy a newspaper and whatever they are, you know? Do you have one of those grids on the back of your post box for a letter to fall into? Does it fall onto a mat, or don't you have a post box? And so you have to come, and they somehow always occur between Southwark and Bond Street. Because it's rather like my radio shows. I think, well, you're going to have to open the microphones in 11 minutes. You better have something to say. And you find it does. If I sat there the night before and thought, OK, what's a clever question there? And happily, it remains the iron horse of the Saturday broadcasting schedules, and yet there's not an ounce of weight in it.
It's brilliant.
And the player we had today...
I will say, I think I was the only person who ever said marmalade.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do
I know.
that. But it's a
marmalade with sausages, delicious.
The question itself is...
Yeah, really good. And actually, onion marmalade is a nice variation on that, but just marmalade is really good with sausages, not with bacon.
Like anything else, you've no idea why it flies and why it does fly, but God bless it. But yeah, it was originally a little thing on TF by Friday, along with the thing we used to call baby left, baby right, where the baby fell this way or that way or remains. They won't let us do that on the radio, but yeah, they're very slight. But that's the beauty.
Had alcohol been provided?
Quite possibly. One for Paul. I know you are a keen aficionado and historian of comedy, and we didn't get on to talk about this actually. We touched on them in passing, but this is actually not to do with the ancient silent comedy. This is your stand-up heroes. Who are your stand-up heroes?
Well, there's a couple. I mean, if we go back to the 1930s, Max Miller was a comic that was a very, very popular comic of the 30s, 40s and 50s. And if you look at his early stuff, he's the first comic really that still feels modern. If you look at George Roby, who was a bit of an older, but if you see his stuff from the same era, it seems very Edwardian, you know, very old hat. Max Miller, he would come on, he'd have the sort of, you know, the floral suit, he'd say, he'd have the big hat, he'd say, "Here, I went home the other night, I says to the wife, here, I says, I hear the milkman has made love to every woman in this street bar one." She says, "I bet it's that stuck-up cow at number 54. I mean, to me, that's like Shakespeare. I just think that's so... The assumptions of the woman, she says, "Yeah, I bet it's her. You know what she's like? Yeah, she wouldn't give the milkman a time of day." So he was not special. Alexei Sell, kind of, the Comedy Store opened up in '79 and made it sort of democratic in that anyone could get up on stage and give it a go. And they discovered you were talking about chance in your life, you know, and stuff. Alexei Sell was one of the first guys that walked into the Comedy Store, had never, for an audition, had never been a comic, had done a bit of left-wing theatre, I think. Had never been a stand-up comedian. And I saw his act in early 1980, when he played Raymond's Revue Bar, like a 50-seater. Only for about 3 weeks did he do this. And it was the most astonishing act you've ever seen in your life. I can't replicate some of it because some of it's too rude. But he had the attitude, this is 1980, I'd never seen a comedian before in this country who didn't care whether the audience liked him or not. He didn't care about that. One of his routines was called Stream of Tastelessness, where every single swear word you can think of was just put next to each other, repeated round and round again, as he got angry and angry and angry, not attempting any kind of sense, but just going through F, B, C, D, you know, like this. And, you know, he'd come on stage, he says, you know, it's great being Jewish, you know, because you can go into work and say, "I can't come into work tomorrow, it's Haka day. I've got to sit in the back garden with a pork pie on my head." You know. He'd had jokes with, you know, I walk around Stoke Newington, I've got a great big clown's hat and a great big pair of boots. It did fuck all for Mussolini. You know, sorry about the language, but you know, just coming out of nowhere, you know, a reference to Mussolini.
Yeah.
And it was just astonishing. So he sort of kind of, while we were still watching Des O'Connor, you know, Des is fine, you know, but Des is from the 50s. And Alexei was, as soon as I saw him, I thought, well, that kind of comic is sort of, I think the phrase I used in the book is dead in the water. It'll take a while, it'll take a few years, but this is something really new and different. You know?
Actually, he still feels new and different now.
He's incredible. You know, I mean, he's sort of, you've probably heard his analogy many times, you worked in the music press, but for me, I think it's the comedic equivalent of seeing the Sex Pistols in Manchester, where it's like, it just really changed, you know, there's lots of guys, sort of Sex Pistols play, the Smiths and people like that, you know, and it changed, they thought we can get into this. And Alexei was exactly the same thing. You knew that if you could find a stage and get on, you wouldn't be as good as that, but you could be listened to.
Danny, you touched on your dislike of management in the first half of the programme. A question here. Your 2-hour resignation live on air from your weekday BBC London show was highly entertaining listening to. Do you have any regrets?
I missed the show. And the thing is, it was, my wife would kiss him full on the lips because suddenly things took off. Even the book came out of everything else. And to be honest, financially, it was one of the most smart things I ever did. But the only place, as radio shuts down and down and down, the only place that still, 5 Live still let us do it, but that's 2 hours a week. And there are parameters within that. But the only show that ever said, just come in and make it up. And that was the reason why, in the end, it was got rid of, and the wheels within wheels there. But I miss it like crazy. But would I do the same thing? Absolutely, because I dislike those people. I don't like those people. They're nuisances. They get in the way of any creativity. They're nothing to do with anything. Really, I mean that. And so I do that again. In fact, the firework display before the show was the thing. I actually walked in because I'd been told they'd stop. Hang on. 2 weeks before, when they're going to axe local radio, I was the poster boy for local radio. Axe local radio, you don't get this. But the word weasels was very, very well, and dim bulbs was very well used. And I walked in, and I've not got that in my armoury. I have none of this gossiping in corridors, writing a waspish piece in The Guardian, sending some emails off to people. I'll walk up to you and I say, "Oh, are you? What you do?" And they didn't know what to do. I walked into their office and I said, "You, stop by, I didn't come out here. And, we're thinking about giving you a weekend show." And so Balin Leonard, who used to do the show, said to me after, he said, "I've never seen anyone do that in real life." I said, "What?" He said, "When they said we've got a weekend show," I said, "You kiss that side, you kiss that side," right? This was before it. And I said, the reason this place was sinking into a miasma of low morale, the reason there's a grey energy over it, the reason no one talks to each other is summed up in the fact that you're staying and I'm going, right? And anyway, it was like Dead Poets Society after. So it was a tremendous Viking funeral. But was it planned? Was it meant to have repercussions? No. Was I asked to do follow-up articles about it? Yes. So it could happen again on next week's 5 Live. You know, it really could. I've never put any store by the idea that what you do, you have this catharsis. You say you're a nuisance, blah blah blah, and everything that went on there, and they still let me go on the air because the paralysis in the BBC is such that there were no meeting rooms open to decide what to do with me. So I went on the air. And I hope it wasn't angry. I hope it was funny. But dear Lord, it was a tragedy. It was a real shame. A real shame.
And actually, you write very movingly in the book about, you write very well in the book about not changing yourself to suit other people. And we've all worked, you know,
yeah,
in
but
the
that makes it sound like, one of those bores who says, "I say what I think."
No, but
there was no planning in it. And as you, I mean, the worst terrible thing is, you know, and Paul probably will testify with a shake of his head. I'm like this. I am overwhelming and bombastic, And you know, and my wife will say, and people say, "Is he like that indoors?" She goes, "Yeah, he is." But equally, the other side of it is that is me old man coming out. Yeah. So I don't see why people who have made a decision about your future hope you're going to abide by the usual terse middle-class rules of saying, "Well, I'm furious. I'll tell you what I'm on. I've got a few friends who are going to plant some." No, I'll walk up to them, and then it's over. You know, and they're still there, and they've not replaced the show, and so that's fine. But I miss it like crazy.
When was that now? How long ago was that?
3 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that.
Have people moved on that you might be invited
no.
back?
Well, you look at it this way, Paul. Here I am, for what, you know, better or worse, one of the better-known Londoners. I've written the first book all about London in the 50s and 60s. You know, I hope I can handle myself in an interview. Would they ask us ever to go there? No, and that's fine by me. And every day I walk by, I hope they'll come out. But they won't come out. They won't. They make it. They make sure they look both ways before they come out of the building, and that squares it for me. Yeah, am I still angry about it? You bet I am. Absolutely angry about it. Are those people still working there? Yes, they are. Is the station any good? No, it ain't.
And just finally, you're going to have to stand up. Vivian and Graham, have you seen our vintage T-shirts in the second row? They say, "Look at this."
Oh!
And turn around and show,
around
and show the audience
Thank
as well.
you very
Just
much
turn
indeed.
Around. Very good.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are... I'm sorry about this, Paul. These are...
Why have you got David Essex on your T-shirt?
Looks like Mike Reed, to be fair. this self-regarding nonsense. These are T-shirts that were made at various times at the BBC because, you know, the BBC is enormous. You can walk back, you get fired from one bit, walk up a corridor and get hired again by someone else. But the main thing I think the rest of the audience can take from that, it's your licence fee at work, everyone. Thank you.
And I think the other thing the audience will take away with them is that they would want to spend an awful lot more time in your company. And
Thank
the
you
best
very
way
much
to
indeed.
do it is to read their books because they're both out now. So Danny Baker, Going Off Alarming, Paul Merton, Only When I Laugh. Thoroughly good reads. You've heard them talk about and tell you some of the stories, but the rest of it is in there. I highly recommend it. And I'd say go for a walk as well.
Yeah!
Thanks.
How about
Thanks.
that? How about that?
If you've enjoyed this afternoon, then it's entirely due to the guests, but also to Blinkbox Books, who have put it on and whose idea this all was, and who our final show tonight is Caitlin Moran and
Hooray.
Kate Moss. So if you have friends, Kate Moss the author, not the model. Just clarifying that. It's a book thing. I know it's London Fashion Week. The other one was busy. If you've enjoyed it and you think friends of yours might, then do let them know via all your wonderful social media ways because there may just be some tickets left if they're very lucky for this evening. But thank you for coming and thank you most of all to Danny Bacon, to
Clare
Danny Baker
Balding, of course.
and to Paul Merton.
And
Thank you very
chiefly
much. Thank you.
yourselves.